Hey, what's up guys? It's Jake here from Chief Live Gaming today, bringing you a step-by-step tutorial video on how to paint rust. The number one question I get asked on my channel is, how do I paint my rust? What kind of techniques do I use? And what paints do I use? Stuff like this. So this video is going to answer all those questions for you guys. It's actually very easy, step-by-step. I'm going to show you, I have 5 vehicles that I'm working on, and it just so happens that this is a 5-step process to my rust. So I'm going to show you a different vehicle for each step of the way, and hopefully this will help some of you guys out. So this is the final step that you're looking at right now. And we can see the the barrels here, the dozer blade in front, things on the side there. I'll have this rust technique. Do your best to ignore the rest of the model because it's not, it's an early stage of paint, but the rust itself is finished, so, or nearly finished. I wanted to show you guys this so we have an idea of what we're building towards. And you can see here that we've got different elements into this rust. We've got some fresh metal chipping here, different levels of wear. We've got some soot, some black worn, we've got some of that nice orange fresh looking rust in these different elements that all come together to make a nice convincing rust effect. So that's what we're building towards. Let's take a look at some of the earlier stages now. And I just want to mention before we get too far into this video that a lot of these techniques are dry brushed. I do a lot of dry brushing. It's actually all dry brushing in this techniques. So you guys can sort of adapt my guidelines to your own taste. If I'm dry brushing a stage that's maybe too heavy for your style or your vision for your model, just back off on the level of dry brushing and it'll dampen down the effect a little bit, and you guys can, adjust all these steps to your liking. So let's take a look at our base, like what I like to think of as our base coat. And this is a technical paint, Typhus Corrosion by Citadel. Now this paint is amazing. It gives you some texture, some grit, and some areas to be picked up by your dry brushing, which you're going to be doing. And you can really see down in here. Let me move my light a little bit here. Oh yeah, there we go. That's nice. So you can see in these different areas where we've laid down just Typhus Corrosion, where it looks nice and gritty and textured. You might not be able to pick that up too much, but if you've ever used this paint, you know how this works. So the trick here is to use it very, very vigorously. Put down the Typhus Corrosion very thick. It's going to feel a little bit weird if you've not used it before, but you need to just glop it on there, and it's going to be messy. It's going to get into other areas of your miniature unless you're very careful. So you might have to come back in later and tidy things up a bit, but you want to get that on nice and thick, and this provides a nice texture for the dry brushing we're going to be doing in later steps. So first step, again, just drop down some Typhus Corrosion, get that nice base layer laid down, and we're going to pick that up in step 2. So moving on, the next thing we're going to do is come in with an orange. So I use a dry paint by Citadel, Ryza Rust. This is a very common combo of the Typhus Corrosion into Ryza Rust sort of pairing here, but you can use any orange paint that you can get your hands on. They all work. This is just what I had. So as you can see, again, this is a very heavy dry brush of orange. You guys can definitely back this down if you want, but as you might see in the later steps of this video, you'll see why I do a very heavy effect here. So again, you can kind of tell here, maybe I'll zoom in a little, that you can pick up all these raised areas that the Typhus Corrosion left behind, and you can really see that texture now. That's what this orange does. It picks out that corroded, nice old, built up kind of gunk that the texture left behind. And that adds a nice orange pop to the rust. Now that is too orange for me. I see a lot of people that leave it like this, and that's totally fine. Depending on what model you're using, what type of rust you want to do, what kind of look you want, you might even be able to just put down Typhus Corrosion and leave it. It might look great. So this is with the heavy orange. Sometimes you can even just do a very light dusting of the orange over the Typhus Corrosion, and that's it. your model will look great. I'm going to show you this technique. This is the more involved one, and you guys can kind of adjust it like I mentioned from there. So here's a very heavy orange, and from there I come in with some silver, some metallic. The color I used for this particular model, Runefang steel. You could use lead belcher, you could use any metallic from any other color range that you have. So what we're doing here is we're coming in and hitting a slightly lighter dry brush on certain areas to give the metal a freshly worn look. The best way I can describe it is, you know, if you're thinking about an older metal surface, there's going to be that corrosion going on, this rust effect, and some of the areas are going to be just scraped over by something that is just fresh wear, freshly worn out, and those areas are not going to be worn over by this rust or taken over by the corrosion yet, so they're going to show with this metal look, the bare metal underneath. So that's why I like to do that. It gives the effect of different levels of wear to your model, really makes the difference between just the orange or the fresh corrosion kind of look. So that's the third step. We're coming in with a metallic. And this is all, again, guys, can be adjusted to your preference, to your level, your taste, per model basis. Now, from here, what I like to do, this is something that a lot of people don't like to do. You come in with black. Now, this is a dangerous step, guys. You need to be really careful here. And again, I used some Citadel paints here, Abaddon black. You can use any black that you happen to have. Very, very dangerous, and I say that because if you overdo the black, you're going to end up with something that looks very similar to plain old typhus corrosion, and that is not what you want. You want to be built up, and I purposely went a little bit heavy on the black here for this particular model because I want to show you kind of an extreme example of what that can look like. This is what I would call the very heaviest that I would go with the black. So what we're trying to do here is give that level of soot, that level of just overall wear. If something sits in a battlefield and sees combat like that, you're going to get this black soot material, all kinds of ash, stuff like that is going to clog up the metal areas, and it's going to look dirty and grungy. So I do this with a black dry brush. Again, to taste, experiment with it, but the black really kind of dulls things down, blends things together, gives it a nice touch. Now, I'm going to show you a different model, the same thing's been done. Sometimes, depending on what you're thinking, how you're feeling about the model, you can just leave it done. You know, this looks pretty nice, right? So we've got some level of very little bit of that orange, that original orange is showing through. It's all been dulled down. You can see some areas like here where that orange really pops out. That's what we want, that's great. But overall, we've got a very muddied kind of look. We've got a little bit of that exposed metal showing. We've got a preliminary amount of kind of wear here, a lot of different levels of wear, and sometimes leaving it like this is perfect depending on what you're feeling. Now, I did take it one step further, and this example that I'm going to show you, depending on the style you want, maybe I'll put them right next to each other so you guys can see. These are two Predators. So depending on what you guys want to do, the model on your right here has been touched up with Rise of Rust again. So these were both the same level, and this one I came back in with Rise of Rust, and I wanted to give it a little bit more of that orange tint, so I re-dry brushed just very lightly to give it that preliminary, I keep saying preliminary, that's not the correct word, that nice little orange tint. So this stage I would call finished again, but just depending on what you guys want, you might want to come back in with some of your original colors and just give it a nice little extra touch. So that's what you could do maybe. And again, if you're not careful, you might notice that this kind of just looks like I took some typhus corrosion and dry brushed it lightly with the orange. So you really need to be careful. That is something that you can do. Let me see if I thought I had an example of that. Oh yeah, here we go. So this here is just typhus corrosion with a very light orange dry brush, and you can't really tell much of a difference between these two. So if you're in a hurry, that's a great way to get a quick and dirty technique, and that's shown here. Just rise of rust right over that typhus corrosion, and again, not a whole lot of difference between these two models at face value. You can see on this side here a little bit of that exposed metal coming through, and since this is not quite where I want it, I'm probably going to come back in with that Runefang steel and just do some very light touches to bring out that exposed metal a little bit more. So I apologize guys if this is getting a little rambly, but I find it difficult to give you guys an exact sort of guide on how to paint rust, but more of an outline of the different steps that you can use and what they look like, a direct result of those steps. So hopefully that has helped you guys out a little bit, and you can kind of use my little stages here as examples for what you might want to do when you're looking at your rust. You're saying, man, okay, it needs a little bit of something, you know, it needs a little bit extra. Maybe you can more easily distinguish what that is now with these different steps that you've seen and use that. So that's mainly what I do, is I just kind of look at something and go, you know, I kind of like that, I kind of don't. What does it need? What is it missing? And go from there. So let me know what you guys think of this video. I hope it's helped some of you guys out. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to let me know. I will take a look at all the comments in the description below if you want to leave me some. As a kind of a final closing thought for the rust, some other great things to do: add a little bit of brown for some mud, and depending on the areas of your model, maybe like these dozer blades in front, if you imagine them tank shocking through some infantry, there's going to be a little bit of blood on these, right, over some battle. So adding some blood really goes well into this color scheme. Of course, depending on the actual model, if it would make sense for blood to be in certain areas, feel free to go in and with some blood. That really adds a nice effect. Now, you guys might know that this was all dry brushing, obviously, so we're not using any kind of pigments or powders, but if you are, like I'm planning to do, heavily kind of weather this whole rhino, or predator rather, with pigments and powders, the rust takes that very well. So this is kind of a base for that, and if you do want to come in with some powders, it's going to only add to your rust effect. It's only going to give it more depth and more finished look. So doing this is almost just a sort of like a base coat, getting ready for that rust kind of finished look with the powders. And I'm gonna definitely have a video with my finished product for you guys once I get the entire model painted, and it's likely that some of the powders and pigments that I use will find their way onto these rusted areas, and you guys can see what that ends up to look like and decide if maybe you want to do something similar for your vehicles or your models. All right guys, I think I've rambled on long enough. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Big thank you to all my donators, my patrons, anybody that's watching this video. You guys make this possible. Thank you very much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.